First of all, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Özge Ersoy. I'm the Public Programs Lead at Asia Art Archive. And I'm very, very happy to have Melati Suryodarmo and Ming Wang with us today. After this introduction, they're going to join us. Melati and Ming have been both dedicated to thinking about how to teach performance for a number of years, and this is what we'll be speaking about today. First, I'll introduce our speakers, then I would like to say a couple of words about why we are organizing this talk. Melati Suryodarmo is an artist based in Surakarta in Indonesia. She attended the Braunschweig University of Art in Germany, where she studied with Buto dancer and choreographer Anzu Furukawa and performance artist Marina Abramovic. She also completed her postgraduate study in performance art in this university in 2002. And since then, she has taught performance art at different institutions. And more recently, in 2012, she founded Studio Plesungan in Surakarta. And this is an artist-run space where she leads workshops for emerging artists and she organizes performance art festivals. Ming Wang is an artist based in Berlin and Stockholm. He's joining us from Stockholm today. He comes from a different educational background and teaching experience. He studied Chinese painting at the Nanyang Academy of Fine Art in Singapore. And he worked as a playwright in the local English theater scene. He holds an MFA from the Slade School of Fine Art, University College London. And he taught performance art at UDK, University of the Arts in Berlin. And last year, he joined the Royal Institute of Art in Stockholm as Professor of Performance in the expanded field. And if I can say a couple of words about the life lessons, this is the second sessions that we are holding as part of the series. And this is a series that we recently started at Asia Art Archive. And if you are not very familiar with AAA, we are an independent, not-for-profit organization based in Hong Kong. And for the last 20 years or so, actually 20 years, this is our 20th anniversary, we've been doing research, archiving programs, and publishing with a focus on recent art in Asia. And when it comes to our research priorities, I should say that we've been doing research about art pedagogy for the last decade. And we've been looking at influential art schools in Asia, thinking about these art schools as sites for artistic exchange. And we also look at the role of artists in creating new forms of education. So Life Lesson series builds on this research that we've been putting together as a team. And this time for this series, we're inviting artists to share their stories and their personal experiences about teaching. And I would like to add also that as a team, we've been also studying performance art in Asia. So today it's a combination of these two research interests for us. And we've been especially looking at how artists use performance to bridge the visual arts, theater, dance, and political activism. So when we use the term performance or performance art, it's something that we're going to speak more about today as well. And this talk is organized as part of AAA's Learning and Participation Program. So we would like to thank SHO Foundation Limited and CK and KHO Foundation for their very generous support. And finally, housekeeping. This session will be for about an hour. We'll have a conversation, then we'll open the floor for questions in the end. So if you have questions, please type them in Zoom's Q&A feature. And you can do this anytime throughout the talk, and we will do our best to answer all of the questions at the end of the talk. So Melati and Ming, thank you so much for joining us and accepting our invitation. Maybe I wanna start with the early days of your practice, and I would like to ask you to speak about a class or an early educational encounter that transformed your work, that transformed your teaching. And Melati, maybe we can start with you. I was thinking that your formal education in Germany focused on performance art, and maybe this was not something that was very usual in the 1990s, in the second half of the 1990s. And is there a particular class or an encounter that you'd like to share with us from this time?
I started in 1994 at Antu Furukawa's class because she was teaching Buto and everything like was by chance. I did not plan really to study art actually, but since I wasn't accepted in other school. I wanted to study international politics, but it wasn't possible in the town. And then I met her, and then I joined her class, and I knew Buddha before from my father and his friends. And I went to Japan in 1992 and took some Buddha classes there in Japan. So it was like a coincidence, but it has changed my life. And I joined Antu Furukawa from 1994 until 1997, where she basically actually did not want to make us become dancers or choreographer. So she actually was teaching with her method, which is very physical Buto, but also research how to create a performance. So her class was very specific, a lot of physical training, and very combination of Japanese and German style, as you can imagine. And but it was very good for me because I was a wild Asian and I had to learn very high discipline and self, what is it, to have a lot of initiative to research on something. So that was a very, very important for me to begin with thinking, a lot of thinking, a lot of reading also. We went to library a lot and watching video a lot, films, and also like observing the daily life. And then Antu Furukawa was another great teacher, I think, and very even more disciplined, but the class was different than the class I joined before with Anju. So different students from different discipline, because I was the first class that when Marina was becoming professor. So it was like students from film class, from sculpture, painting, so more mixed photography. So the class was also like creating its own dynamic, and Marina was more into making performance. And we talk a lot, we discuss a lot, we fight, we criticize, we help each other, we learn how to, for example, to document, how to all other side dish of the practice itself, which are also very important, including writing the text, including how to make a good photo of documentation, and how to use the camera, which angle, these kind of practical things that that you think probably somebody else would make for you, but if you are a performance artist, you really have to know how you want to your work documented. So this kind of practical things, including then, like a project that is happening also in the formal institutions like Kunstwerke. We were students, we were performing at Kunstwerke. We were students, we were performing at Hebel Theater, now How Eins in Berlin, where I did my butter dance for the first time. And we went to Irish Museum of Modern Art in the big exhibition, group exhibition, to Vanish Biennale, to NMAC Foundation in Spain, and many other places. So it was a good, of course, very, very useful for me now, how to, for example, how to behave, at least also with the institution, and how to keep things on track. Mm-hmm. So it's not only about creating. So because I think it was very, how do you say, like, of course, all the content about performance art, the history, and sometimes she invited like professional, curators to see our performances, or critics to see our performances in the class. Sometimes we spent, like 2 weeks somewhere in the Spain or in France for the cleaning the house workshop. That is the famous Abramovich method, where we were fasting for 2 weeks. And then there I realized that actually Marina was supporting me to research my own root. I would say root, okay, you know, like my origin and my culture, and so yeah, that was very important moment where I decided to, yeah, why not from distance, of course. And the more you have distance, the more you can have like kind of a connectivity with it. So it's strange, but yeah, it's my interest to go back is always like, you know, back and forth at that time. But yeah, after 20 years, I go back. Yeah.
And was there a particular class or a particular workshop that was very challenging for you, or that was something that was quite unexpected for you? You gave the example of the collective fasting, for instance. I was wondering if there's if this is one of those classes,
you
or
know,
those methodologies.
Yeah, for my colleagues or my classmates, some of them, they were like, of course, for them is very new, and for me also very new, of course, because we were walking like around the lake like the whole day. We were blindfolded for the whole day. We did not eat, just drink water, no sugar or herbal tea, and we did not allow to speak. So, but we survived, and it's amazingly interesting to know our body. And for me, it was like I had a lot of questions to Marina also, because where did she get all this knowledge, you know? And she somehow, she's also like practicing Tibetan Buddhism, and she also learned about Zen Buddhism. She learned also about Australian Aboriginal culture. She collect also like very strong from Balkan culture. So all what happens with the body, she took ideas from the ancient method, which also for me not a very new one, because Indonesia we have a lot of traditional method that involves your physical exercise or physical endurance or physical training. For example, like there are some different kind of fasting that, for example, you stay in the dark room for 1 month, so you don't go out, no light, nothing, no, not speaking, just alone in the dark space, in the dark room for 1 month, or fasting, or just eating rice with salt and water, you know, like this kind of different kind of fasting that is to make a cleansing of the body, which will affect the mental state. So of course it's very how do you say, very strange for art students who normally work, you know, with painting and then they have to go in the jungle, in the forest, or we went to the south beach of Jerez de la Frontera, where nothing was, it was like 46 degrees, something like that, but beautiful, and it was like apocalypse. That people did not talk to each other, but we are facing a very beautiful beach. So, and that kind of experience is unforgettable. And but I'm not sure if I would apply this for my students, you know.
Yeah, this is actually sounds, I would like us to go back when we think about the traditional forms of knowledge, or the traditional cultural forms that you are using, both in your work and also in your teaching practice. But maybe, Ming, I can ask the same question to you at this point, because you come from a different educational background. You were trained in Chinese painting, and around that time, I know that you were also active in the theater scene in Singapore, and I'm wondering how these experiences have shaped your practice.
Yes, of course, I'll talk a bit about that. But first, I wanted to say that what Melati just said was so inspiring. I mean, I wish I had like a guru like Marina Abramovich to teach me, you know. But you know, I don't think I can handle the Marina method. But I want to do the Melati method. Okay, you have to do a workshop with me and my students soon. My own journey is really and my relationship with performance is really much more tenuous and much more accidental, I think. I was doing Chinese painting at Nanyang Academy in Singapore, which was such a kind of like a traditional and very kind of disciplined practice. But part of me was itching to, you know, was restless, and I started working in the English language theater scene as a playwright. I was writing plays and playing with language because in Singapore, you know, it's a multilingual society, and there's a lot of hybrids between different languages. And it was an arena where I think I started experimenting with language. And the other thing about that time in Singapore was I also, because I was spending a lot of time with fellow actors and theater practitioners, you could share some of their frustrations, you know, of being typecast in certain roles, or challenges of being an Asian performer or actor in let's say the London West End or in America. And so issues of stereotyping, casting, and representation, I think these were some of the things that affected me at a very early stage of my career. But then I moved to London, and actually a lot of my life-changing experiences happened outside of school. It was when I went to the theater. Basically, I went to London and I watched all the shows I could watch, and I was drawn more and more actually to physical theater. And there were wonderful companies like Complicity with Simon McBurney. You had Force Entertainment with Tim Etchells, for example. And I also discovered dance theater of Pina Bausch when they performed at Sadler's Wells. And I was drawn to this thing where, you know, there was a separation between the voice and language from the body. The body became a kind of like a vessel, a placeholder for identity. This is something that I took from, you know, my experiences in going to the theater in London. And what happened was, after I graduated, I lived in London for about 10 years. And to survive, I did a lot of art education work. So I was doing work for museums and galleries, for the education programs, trying to conceptualize workshops and execute them. And at that time, when I was working, there was a great emphasis on putting in cultural diversity into the institutions and looking for new audiences. And this was a very top-down policy. And by the time it filtered down to the actual cultural workers, the grassroots workers, I could see how that a lot of these policies were being used in a very short-sighted way. That they would try and just have something visible with ethnic minorities as a showcase, and not really dealing with the deeper kind of like problems, the entrenched forms of racism that was happening. This really colored my time in London, both as a cultural worker as well as in my practice. So to give you some examples, I was working with a lot of students, minority youth, people with physical disability, mental health issues, all the kind of sidelined communities at the time. And there were also a lot of refugees, newcomers who couldn't speak English so well. And so my role actually was to kind of introduce more physicality in forms of expression, and also using technology. So work with computers, so it doesn't have to foreground the way you speak, because it's so kind of, the way you speak, it's such a minefield, when it comes to intersections of class and race, for example, in such a society. So this was the kind of milieu that I was kind of forming my early kind of practice with. And it had a very large bearing, I think, on my practice later on, struggling with all these issues. But the main thing I think that I took out of this experience was being less enamored with spoken word theater and looking more into the physical theater, the universality of how language and voice can be separated from the body, and how it can be used as a kind of tool or perhaps a weapon.
I think both of you have been speaking about how for you performance is not necessarily or strictly limited to the visual arts. You know, starting with your work, and that obviously or eventually influences the way that you teach about performance as well. And maybe I want to approach this from a particular point of view, and then going back to what Melati was speaking about the cultural traditions of performance. And I would like to ask how both of you have been influenced by different types of cultural traditions of performance in different parts of Asia. And Melati, for instance, in your case, you've been dedicated to researching traditional art forms in Indonesia for a very long time right now. And you incorporate that in your teaching as well. For instance, Studio Pelesungan offers classes and workshops about performance art, but also about dance. And I was also thinking about your father and then the school that he was running. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that, about how cultural traditions of performance have been influencing your practice.
You know, I think Indonesia is very, very diverse. Yeah, it's very, very rich with different kind of traditional cultures, and how now also the development, you know, some area they are still very traditional. Some, you know, like becoming like a metropole like Jakarta or Bandung or other big cities in Java. Of course, it's different than my early, when I was young, my early time. Since my basic in art is like about contemporary practice based on Western knowledge, I think more and more I understand and question, where are we? You know, where is our contemporary art? What is contemporary for Indonesia? What is the history? Where is the root? You know, and then I ask myself, so performance artists, performance contemporary practice using body as the medium, the main medium. And then many of the performance art practice in the West, they also use, you know, like a lot of physical endurance, that, like, you know, like, or of becoming, you know, like, from, if you know about a little bit about Antonin Artaud and then Grotowski, you know, all this physical theater history. And then performance art, and then, you know, the conceptual art and this kind of thing. And then I was wondering, where is the philosophy of Java? Where is what is there? What is behind all the knowledge? Where are the knowledge? It's very tough for Indonesia. We are not familiar with, for example, script or traditional script or text that, you know, probably from the 17th century or 18th century, even 19th century. Is most of them, they are not existing anymore, and it's very difficult to research. So the knowledge is somehow more like a kind of an organic knowledge that is carried generation to generation, including the time of colonialization. So the time of colonialization is quite tough, because we were like, of course, we're not really in the Republic of Indonesia yet, but it's like a bit messed up, you know. And then history of a traditional art is only by oral story, only by, but also mostly interpretation, new interpretation from the 20th century about an artwork that was, you know, like a traditional performing art that has been existing in the 19th centuries, for example. And so from this, except those who comes from the royal palace, like, you know, like literature or from the royal area, but the traditional, the folk culture, there is there are no proper writings about it. It's carried by generation through generation with all the changes, including the knowledge, of course. So I began in 2002 to research on one particular performance that I was amazed when I was a child, that is using, you know, like a kind of a trance. And, you know, I was a child and I was taken every Sunday by my grandmother to the zoo. And then at the zoo, there is this kind of attraction for me as a child, where dancers become very trance. They are using whip cracking, they are eating glass bulb, you know, and they were like really like trance. Yeah, and it was quite scary. But it's very inspiring 35 years later for me to start seeking where this idea come from, you know. And then I found out that it was a very political performance that was pointed to the king that time in the 16th century, where the king became very weak. So, and then I continue. Oh, and then, you know, my father is one of the one who is my father is also my teacher. he inspired me a lot in terms of seeking knowledge, ancient knowledge. So he since in the 70s he went to temples. He's now later in late 90s he say reading from temples. So reading from temples mean like, what is the knowledge that can appear from a temple? The spirituality, the you know, like the history of why the temple was there. You know, like temple is something special. It's not only for praying, but also like something, a marking, marking of a history. Like it has also a function of monumental. And so he moves. He created his movement, Amarta movement, and he kept doing it and learning and making notations and so on and so on until in the 80s he opened his own school. And as an alternative education, but also to support something like maybe like what's so-called experimental at the time, or explorative art. So people join his, you know, padepokan lemah putih. Padepokan means like a traditional school. So here, the traditional dancers, they have family management. They have their padepokan, which is an independent kind of a dance school or wayang school or anything that is practicing the learning and teaching process. So from that, I think in my later thought or idea, I was thinking like more about the sustainability and about human resource, artists as laborer, also like not only, you know, like producing art, but how to work. So this is probably one of my important intention why I opened my studio Pesungan, my artist space, because here going to traditions is only possible mostly if you go to the maestro and then you learn and so, but or you go to academic with a very academical structure. not everyone is feeling free to research freely as an artist. You don't have to be an academic that you have to make such an academic research, but you can make a research of your own way, and then observe and get in touch, or like something that is strengthen your inspiration. No, traditional art is definitely traditional culture definitely a very strong has a very strong source, or it is a very strong resource, and it doesn't mean that I make like a traditional art in a new creation, but I like to know more about how, for example, a farmer working on the rice fields with by looking at the star, this kind of thing. So why is the star is the guide of like of the activity of the rice fields. We lost this since the modernization of the rice production. We lost this knowledge, and that kind of things. And sometimes you find out the knowledge is in the kind of a poetry, like or traditional singing. So all the knowledge is in the text of like a poetry. So yeah, amazing. But the source is very difficult to find, actually.
I'm thinking about the school that your father was running, and also the last time we spoke to each other, you were also saying that you taught performance art at different universities in Indonesia as well. But you were saying that you were very much interested in creating this structure, educational structure, as an artist-run space. And you were saying that this is not a school. And is that because you wanted to have that flexibility that you were talking about?
Yeah, actually, the artisan space is quite common here. Like visual artists, they open their space and they share their studio for activities. Sometimes they also even have a galleries, and then they make an exhibition for other artists. And so, and I thought for performance art, there is still not existing. I thought probably would be a good idea, because I only can do performance art. And so I thought, since I created the performance art laboratory since 2007, and then the undisclosed territory also, together with help of collaboration with Boris Nisloni, one of the performance art maestro, I would say, from Germany. And so step by step, I ensure myself, okay, now it's time to open something that is more, that has a kind, that provide a kind of a platform for activities or projects or programs that has that support a kind of a learning process, development, or a laboratory. I love laboratory, and where artists meet and discuss and exchange, and without having to make a collaboration work together, without having to make a new piece within a week, So there's no pressure, but there's a knowledge exchange, since there are many great performance artists, but they are not written in the history. So I think that I would, like this moment, like during the laboratory, is very precious, and artists can learn each other or share each other, which is very rare. Let's say, is there a laboratory for sculptures? I don't think there are many, but there are a lot of writings about sculptures, but performance art, we need still to keep the bridge, to keep the bridge of knowledge. And so we need to still to grow. It's considered to be a young genre, I would say, since the 50s, probably, if we stretch down again, maybe in the early 20s in Europe. but it's still young comparing to painting. Of course, it's very young, and so that's why.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, and in Indonesia, the performance art practice is not. There is no. How do you say? It's something that is not really much, discussed at the art school too. So even probably the institutions a little bit, yeah, it's not art, it's performance arts, something like this. So mostly the knowledge of performance arts is very, very limited. Yeah, so that's why, well, teaching performance art is not easy, but to facilitate someone to learn performance art is probably better for me.
I think this is a great point to turn to you, Ming. And then I was also thinking about your position as the professor of performance in the expanded field at the Royal Institute of Art. But if I can just backtrack just a little bit, when I asked the question about the cultural traditions of performance, you know, in Southeast Asia and also in East Asia, I also had your ongoing research on Cantonese opera. It's a field that you've been interested in for a number of years. And I was curious if your interest in these different forms of performance, could they help us understand the idea behind this performance in the expanded field that is part of your title?
Sure, at least from my perspective, yeah.
Yeah.
But I also, you know, after listening to Melati, I could see actually a lot of parallels from my research since the last 10 years when I was doing field trip research in Hong Kong and Taiwan, for example. I mean, it stems from my interest in traditional theater, in this case, Chinese opera, and in my case, Cantonese opera. It's linked to my family. My aunt is a Cantonese opera actress in Singapore. She's the queen of Cantonese opera in Singapore, Joanna Wong. And so I used to go backstage at the street operas when I was studying in Singapore to observe the kind of the life that went on backstage. And also at the same time, I was also witness to some of the struggles that my aunt went through in trying to promote, to preserve this art form. You know, it's such a big responsibility that she feels towards trying to preserve and kind of promote this art form. But that was when I was still in Singapore, and then I left all of that when I went to England and Germany, and it wasn't until about 2010, so a decade already, when I went to Hong Kong and had the chance to actually observe at firsthand the Cantonese opera traditions. My initial impulse was to study the history of cinema in Hong Kong, and the particular genre of Cantonese opera cinema was my starting point. And I was looking at how, you know, in the 30s and 40s, you had this wonderful marriage between the stage and the screen, because you had Cantonese opera troupes who would go to the west coast of USA to perform for the Chinese migrant population there, and they would bring the ideas from Hollywood and the stories and songs from the latest Hollywood films. They brought it back to Asia via Hong Kong, and they made movies. And it was a kind of like a symbiotic relationship where stage and screen kind of like influence each other and kind of develop into what Cantonese opera, what we perceive as Cantonese opera today. It's actually quite a modern form and a very flexible form, because distinct from other forms of Chinese opera in mainland China, Cantonese opera in Hong Kong, because of its connection with cinema, changed, modernized, adapted. And this flexibility, you know, is one of the qualities that you need for an art form or cultural form to be dynamic and to survive. And this message was driven home very much when I started to observe the structures, the social structures, built structures, and the community surrounding the art form. So I started going to the ritual Cantonese operas that were performed in temporary bamboo stages that were built in villages and were funded by temples. They were mainly for celebrating, marking religious holidays, and they were performed not just for humans, but actually as an offering to the spiritual world, to the gods. And this is very striking because, you know, this has kind of been eroded to a certain extent in Singapore, but in Hong Kong, it has an uninterrupted line of history. Whereas in mainland China, during Cultural Revolution, a lot of these practices were interrupted. But to observe these kind of like ongoing traditional ceremonies, rituals, this still continues in Hong Kong and as well as in Taiwan. So I also spent time in Taiwan looking at these like what do you call it, the persistence of this you know, religious practices relating to performativity. So Melati mentioned like trance, you know, and all of these things, and within Taoist Buddhist traditions you also have this, and it is quite spectacular and becomes more spectacular, you know, because they adapt to new technologies, for example, and how they kind of like keep their practice relevant, and how it kind of captures the imagination of contemporary audiences. So you have, you know, grandchildren with grandparents still attending these things because it becomes a kind of public spectacle, you know, that attracts it. So this really kind of had a deep impact on me. And maybe at this point, I'd like to show one image to kind of illustrate this. So Sam, if you could show the image of field trip to Po Toi O. I can talk a little bit about that. So, you know, as part of my practice, I've done a lot of kind of education projects. Well, education, but I don't like the word education. But it's not just with institutions, not with schools, but I've done kind of like, I was freelancing as well. And I had a chance to kind of share some of these research during field trips with certain organizations. So you can see this was one particular field trip that I made in Hong Kong in 2017. And I kind of led a group of mixed students from the Zurich University of Arts in transcultural collaboration, but also students from Shanghai, Singapore, Taiwan. And you know, a lot of, even for the Asian students, this was the first time some of them had kind of been to such a kind of ritual performance event. I mean, it evolved during the hours of the day. You can see on the bottom three images how the space, the bamboo theater has been kind of adapted for different events. You know, it could be a lion dragon dance. It could be used for village speeches, prize givings, and then it turns into a Cantonese opera performance, and tended by different villagers who converge in Po Toi O on the birthday of the saint. And so this was such an eye-opener for me, and to also share this and to talk about it in a way where it's not really about being a tourist. I'm trying not to be the kind of tour guide to show something exotic to the younger generation or Asian students, or to kind of friends from Europe, but to talk about actually the structures that are behind this, you know, the social context behind this. And this is something I think that I kind of continue to engage with when I talk about, when I discuss performance with people today, you know, how it should be tied to the public arena, you know, the public space. tied to the everyday, tied to lived experience, how all of this are interconnected, how we are all interconnected. I think this is something that, that I kind of learned from observing, this traditional practices.
I'm also curious about how you translate what you just talked about into the classroom, because for your students who are in the class or in a workshop area with you on site, if you don't have that flexibility to see that type of performances, or if you don't have the chance to do these site visits together, how would you bring these ideas to the classroom? Could you give a couple of examples for us?
Yes. So of course, in Hong Kong, I had a possibility to do that. But in Europe, I don't really directly talk about Cantonese opera traditions. But like I said, some of the issues about the precarity of cultural tradition, of art expression, traditional art expression, and how this needs to be protected, preserved, and to find continued support of this. And this is linked to, to the community, to having a concern for your own histories and the people around you, the communities around us. And so, issues about listening to everybody in the group, this certain kind of care that you need to take with people that you're surrounded with. This has become more and more a kind of an important aspect of what we do, say, in the classroom, in the studio. I can give you an example. Let's see if I can take. Can I get the two pictures? Performance class Berlin 2018, 1B and 1C. Yeah. The next one, perhaps. The next image. So, like, for example, these two. Yeah. I didn't kind of like set a finite kind of project with the students. It's really to listen and to discuss with consensus as a group to what they're interested in, and so what that group in that particular year were really interested in was about nature, about the environment. And so if you go back to the previous image, what they finally did was we organized to try to kind of bring the field outside of the UDK into the classroom, into the studio. So we had to work with like gardeners, professional gardeners, to kind of work out how to do this, because we're actually on the 3rd floor of an old building, and we had to find ways to kind of make this possible, and how to kind of maintain this over a period of 10 days. And if you go to the next slide, please. And then what they did within the space, sorry, the one after, yeah. And so what the group decided to do was they all had their own individual or collaborative projects that they wanted to do. I just merely kind of like was a kind of a mediator, trying to kind of get them to think about how they're going to support each other in organizing these events. And so actually we made a kind of wayang kulit, like a shadow play, where we could control the room. So we could turn off all the lights, we could use torches, and we could put sound in it. People were doing concerts, film screenings, performances over a period of a weekend. And it's really coming back to this idea of how can we listen to each other and kind of work together to kind of towards a kind of common goal, to highlight the issues that they were kind of like concerned with at the time.
I have to say that what both of you are talking about are also very inspiring for our team, because AAA is a collecting institution. We collect archival materials, and when we look for archival materials around performance art, especially in Asia, we don't only look at pioneers of performance art who circulate their work in the individual arts, but we also look for materials from artists who document traditional dance forms, street theaters, demonstrations, protests, as performance as well. So for us, I think we share this similar concern, which is about how to expand the definition of performance in the first place. So I just wanted to say that what you're talking about, I mean, the reason why we are trying to create this framework is thanks to artists like yourself. So I just wanted to say that out loud. But I'm aware of time. Maybe I can ask for one last question. And maybe we can have an extra 10 minutes for the questions coming from the audience members as well. If you are just joining in and if you have questions, please type them in the Q&A feature. Maybe in a couple of minutes, we'll go back to your questions. But Melati and Ming, I would like to ask my last question, if that's fine with you. And it actually goes back to what you were talking about, Ming, the idea of care and the idea of creating a community. Because, you know, for us, I'm also thinking about when we think about performance art, again, we don't necessarily only think about the individuals, but we look at how they meet each other, how they teach each other, or how they create networks. Festivals are extremely important in Southeast Asia, for instance, in this sense. So I want to ask you about your communities or the relationships that you create or the kinships that you create when you develop your own practice and when you think about teaching. And we can start with either of you. Maybe because we started speaking about festivals, Melati, can we go with you first?
Yeah, I can show you some images. Samantha, can you help me, please? Samantha? Anyway,
Coming up.
So I would like to show some images because I was afraid that there are thousands of images, but I was confused to choose which one. So I just have chosen some that give some impression about our space and also some of my our activities and my teaching activities. So this is we are basically, next slide please. Basically, we are located at the end of a small village in the northern part of Solo. Next. And we have a house that is not so big, but also not too small as in our indoor space. But we also have a platform, which is a small platform, which is only 7x7 in the middle of a landscape, which is the area of the studio itself. And so it's enough, so we don't have to go to the mountain or something like that if we do some workshop. It's enough space to be in the nature, but also to be inside and not to be in the city, but it's not too far if we need to go to the city. So something that the place is quite how do you say, is very good, very efficient, and yet it still has the nature of the local village. Next. So this is an image of the cleaning the house with Marina. I go back to 2004, where the image that I had told you about, the cleaning the house 2 weeks, not fasting, and in the beautiful beach. No one was there but us, you know that, but we were not speaking. It's an amazing moment that inspired me also, like to my teaching method also. Of course, I'm not creating my own. I'm not living, you know, like I'm not arriving from the heaven and then coming down and then having a method. So I'm learning a lot from my teachers. Next. In my teaching, I of course use a lot of nature, and I think the nature is very strong. It is the most difficult part, the most difficult challenge to perform is when you have to perform in an open nature. So I also did performances in the open nature, in the landscape, in the top of Bolzano, between border between Austria and Italy, northern Italy, where there is no one in the mountains. So visitors came with the bus and so, and then there you feel like, wow, how small you are as a human being in this huge creation of the nature and the power of the nature. So nature is very good. It gives a lot of, how do you say, strength also to our mental. I also work indoor and very conservative, I would say, because many of the students, they are not performance artists or not actor or dancers. In the visual art, they are painters and sculptors, they make videos, they make films and so on. So I started always from the very basic, how to create an idea, how to construct an idea to become, to make a performance piece. Next. This was in Umeå, also in Sweden. I was teaching there sometimes.
Oh.
Yeah. Next. So this is different situation. This is where if I give a workshop in Solo in my studio, so people like students coming sometimes from other towns. So we make a little camping for 2 or 3 days, and we change the platform and we put the bamboo roofing and then with the mosquito nets and simple mattress, and they sleep there. And then we eat together and we exercise. And next, we can go to the next few images. So the platform is more like a changing platform. It's very simple. My studio is totally simple. Is very suitable with how do you say, with the situation of the village. I don't build a high building or something like the fancy building. It's not going to be working. So except also we don't have money. So I organized the studio with a very minimum budget, and everything is, you know, like according to the Indonesian economical situation also. Like we don't force ourselves to get some funding from the government if they are not interested, you know. So somehow it's very rough, but it's very basic, but we try to find out the best way to still to be able to. Next please, Samantha. Yes. So before, one thing before. You see the bamboo roofing is only for temporary, so we built it for some days, and in other events too. We in the festival we built that, and then we for the workshop, and then before the festival we remove, and then the platform is free with open air as an open air platform for the performance. So we also have a common kitchen, so we always have a regular time to eat together, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then we work the rest of the time or take a rest. Next. Some of my early students from here, from Indonesia. Next. At the end, I joined also at the festival. And then 2007, starting 2007, we create this PALA project, Performance Art Laboratory project, where I created together with Boris Nisloni, some artists with our international networking to come and meet Indonesian artists. And we share here, you see our late friends, Juliana Yasin was also joining in 2009 in Bali. So we started in Bali until 2009. But then it's too expensive for us. We cannot afford, we don't get any funding from anywhere. So we moved to Solo, and everything happened in Solo, like the laboratory and then the festival. Next. So this is the last undisclosed territory in 2018. The next one supposed to be here. It was before every year, but it costs a lot of money, and I wanted to distribute our limited budget into other activity, which is also supporting dance. So Solo is very very rich with dance, with dancers, a lot of dancers, good dancers here. But also there are many independent or freelance choreographer, independent choreographer who are not having space. So I thought like to support them, their development, to provide some platform at our studio. So this is our indoor situation when we had the kind of an intimate situation of performance, but mostly it happens outside. Next. This is the dance laboratory project, first dance laboratory project, which was in collaboration with Christina Caprioli Dance Company from Stockholm. So some Indonesian dancers and some Swedish dancer, we make a kind of a laboratory project where everybody is sharing their thought, their ideas. Next. This is this is not the second one. This is actually the third one that happens last year. We collaborate with Japan and Malaysia and Taiwan, young choreographers and senior choreographers to work on possibilities and talk not only about creating dance, but also how our economical life as a freelance or as an independent artist can sustain in different countries, different situations. So this kind of thing we also share, not only about creation or idea or have to collaborate, no, but we talk a lot about this kind of situation and what is most important to find a strategy to not only to survive economically, but also of course through a work. Next. This is, for example, when Anna Woyak was performing during Undisclosed Territory. We don't have a lot of visitors for performance art. Sometimes 100, or if there are many people, 150, but it's not a big festival comparing to other festivals in the town. But it's one of the most sustained performance art festivals, I think, in Indonesia. Now it's the edition 12 supposed to be this year, and we gain more public actually. Next. Next. So we do also like long durational performance. This is Francisca Retno from Jakarta. And last time we put some strong theme, which was food. So we had the laboratory project before, the PALA project, to discuss about how artists use food in their performances and watching, you know, like searching for the history, what is food, and so on, so on, so on. And then we also perform pieces that are related with food. So we create also artists that has been working with food. Next. So this is like the common images, like when we have events outdoor. So people from the village, from everywhere, they mix together. We sit on the straw mat and watching performances. Next. Yeah, I think community is very important. Community is something that we need to grow with. It's not something that we create, but we need to grow with and to connect. And so performance art community in the world is very, very, how do you say, spread and very various. And now in the visual art, there are more and more performance art practitioners that are more suitable for the gallery, for museums, but I'm also giving a lot of love and attention to performance art practice who are working, you know, like a more like community-based or, you know, like underground or whatever, grassroots, you know, like more like a independent connection. So I think there are many There are many. There are many festivals that are very interesting, spread from Europe to South America to the United States, to in Asia, in the Philippines. I think they also have Singapore. Of course, we have FOI, Future of Imagination. We have also in Hong Kong, in China, in Taiwan, and also in Thailand, also in Japan. So many networking that we need to maintain to create a larger community to produce a continuous knowledge about performance art. So it's not necessarily have to be a formal kind of not to how do you say in English, institutionalizing a knowledge into a kind of an academical form. So that's what I think. For example, at least for Indonesia, I mean, of course, I go perform museum and galleries and so on, but you know, but I come also from these connections. I come from this open connection that I feel free also to express anything. So this is also yeah. I think, I don't know the new generation if they're still interested to this kind of a community-based event, but more and more I see it is becoming more institutionalized, and more they are seeking to become like yeah, you know, like more gallery or museum artists without knowing enough about the knowledge of performance art. So I think that's quite slippery. I think that's from me.
Yeah.
Sorry, a bit long.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think it was, for me, it was very inspiring to see how your regular teaching practice is always interlinked with the idea that you're thinking about the festivals, how you create the festivals as an extension or as a part of the pedagogy for performance. But Ming, I also want to ask the same question to you, and to ask whether you also find yourself in similar type of communities or relationships.
In my case, it's quite specific. I build my own. I have to actively build my own community of queer artists, queer sisterhoods, of friends who are also working with forms of performance, but who also share a kind of an interest in queer strategies. So it's really about kind of trying to find opportunities to come together and to collaborate. This is something which I kind of think is more and more necessary. And so it's really about trying to kind of turn a queer eye towards forms of normativity, you know, as a kind of resistance against normalization or conformity. Yeah, I know we're short of time, but I'll leave you with one example, one image, which is the "Aku akan bertahan," I will survive. This is a good example, because this is a self-organized camp, like for a house of queers based around Asia, Southeast Asia and Pacific, in response to an invitation to do something in Australia. But I chose to. I was supposed to do the production in Australia, but I decided to do it in Jogja instead, which is kind of like the midway point between Singapore, my home city, and Brisbane at the time. And I invited, you know, friends from Jogja. So Tamara, who's a trans artist. We have Shaman Suku, who's Singapore Indian based in Sydney, and Brad, who's Australian. And we worked with a local team of choreographers and costume makers, makeup, and we spent about 10 days doing kind of like a dance workshop and video shoot on the top of the volcanic mountain as a kind of queer Southeast Asian take on Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which is such an iconic queer film in the world. And this was in 2015. And then last year, I invited them again, the same group, but this time I added an artist from Thailand and an artist from Philippines. And we made a performance, so we did a same kind of camp for a week in Bangkok. Also, working with a local Thai team to create a performance for the opening of Spectrosynthesis 2, which is exactly, this is the a queer contemporary art exhibition on LGBTQ issues in Southeast Asia, that the first of its kind in an art institution in Asia. So it was at the Bangkok Art and Cultural Center. And this was a chance for us to also get together again, catch up. It's also trying to find a way for us to continue to build a collective queer storytelling, peer support, trust, growing together. I mean, these things of care, I think, peer support, I think is part of art education. It's something I also try and promote when I talk to students who have the privilege of being in an art school, and realizing that the community around them, the peers, are the ones that are going to be part of the artistic family, that they are the ones that you could turn to for the rest of your life if you treasure and build these relationships.
I wish we could speak much, much longer and delve more into what we've been talking about. But I guess at this point, we can perhaps choose two questions, because there have been several questions coming from the audience members. So if you allow me, I'll try to summarize some of them, because there are at least 4 questions about the COVID times and the lockdown. Sneha Ragavan, Tanya Amador, Diane Butler, and Jacqueline, they're all speaking about the challenges with the lockdown, because the presence, the physicality, or the embodiment, they are very crucial for performance and also teaching performance. And how are these ideas changing? What are the challenges in your opinion? And what's going to happen after the lockdown is over? So this is basically a summary of the 4 questions coming from 4 members. And I also, I would like to raise one more question from Jane de Beauvois, which is about social process and performance. And she says, performance art can also intervene in the public space, raising awareness to social issues. So can you speak a little bit about the relationship between protest or resistance and performance? So these would be the 2 questions that I would like to share with you, and I will definitely share all the questions with you over email as well.
Maybe just very short about the pandemic time. I think the whole world is facing a very difficult time, and no one is, everybody is complaining about the economical situation. Everybody is complaining about, depression also, about being home too long, but also now I think for myself, I start loving to stay at home. like never been staying at home more than 3 months now. I did. And so I think teaching performance art, of course, is not possible. But why don't we ask for ourselves, like, accepting the situation, accepting this condition of the world, and also do our best. There are also, for performance art, you don't have to do every time with physical. There are a lot of books to read, a lot of a lot of things to see and to watch. Like a lot of books there, especially books. We are mostly busy with mobile phone and Google now, but why not books? So I will encourage my students to read, to use this time with different quality, to still keeping on the intention of creation, but also there are many things that we can do without going out of the house. So it's very difficult if you're not used to it. But I think I would rather ask my students or my friends to accept the situation. I'm having my solo exhibition at the moment in Macan Museum in Jakarta. Now and it's still closed until now after 2 weeks open, and then it's closed until now. So I don't know when it's going to be it will be reopened, but no rush. But maybe in August, but we still don't know, you know, like it's the situation is still unpredictable, and we love other people. We don't want to be carrier. We don't want to be a person who carry the virus, you know, and I think everything, not only art, can also take time. I think take time, but still like being aware for what happens, you know, like, because politically it's also can be very dangerous that something can happen during this this pandemic time that is very tricky. But of course our awareness should be completed, you know, with this kind of it's a collective, the whole world collective retreat. I think so. I would consider this time as that. So no forcing. Everything is a little bit redeemed at the moment, and I'm sure it's going to be open again. I would like to encourage everybody not to rush, not to force yourself to create something, you know, not to, you know, there's so many online now dance competitions in Indonesia, dance, you know, like on online dance program. And I think that's interesting because now people are shifting in learning about dance video instead of just performing in front of a camera, you know. So now they start learning dance video. They're a little bit of another kind of knowledge, which is also interesting. But I think for performance art, it is, except you are using on purpose as conceptually working with technology and virtuality, it's fine. But for me, like for someone who is not working with technology a lot, I can wait. I can wait. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's it. Everybody's asking about. It's very anxious about very. Not knowing about where to go after the pandemic also, you know. I also don't know.
We'll take our time.
Yeah, let's take our time.
Yeah. And Ming, would you like to take maybe the second question about the relationship between protests and performance?
I can talk a bit about that, but I do want to add something to what Melati has said. I mean, this is my main mission for the last month, because I'm, you know, as being a professor here in Stockholm, I really have to plan for the next academic year and to give allowance for all kinds of possibilities. But I actually see it as a good challenge, and I think basically I think people do need this kind of live connection with other people, and one method of doing that is to kind of organize and set up, to get out of the restrictions of the school building, of the studio, you know, and to go out into to organize walks, to go out, and you can organize this in smaller groups. You can change different groups at some point, but to actually go on a walk with a small group and take your time and to talk about things is a kind of a good method to kind of brainstorm exactly about what's happening. This will have an impact on what art means, on what role of the artist means, on what art school means, and everything. It will change everything. So in a way, we have to kind of step back and reflect on this very much, but we can't do it alone. We need a community, but how are we going to do this? Besides doing online stuff, I do think there's a lot of value in meeting face to face, and you can control distances and you're not in an enclosed space. So I encourage the idea of going for walks and all of this. As regards to protests and performance, this is something that I've been looking at closely as well, because I've been observing the protests in Hong Kong since several years, and of course the latest months of protests since June last year there was the tactics have changed, and so there's a lot of kind of like ephemeral kind of like action. There's a lot of performativity that's kind of used as a kind of a tool in the strategies. Some of them are just purely for dealing with the police. Some of them are creative, and so I've been observing these things when people use music, for example, when they go to a mall to do mass singing, when they appear as a certain character, as a mascot. I'm thinking of Doraemon as a figure, a popular culture figure from the cat from the future is coming here to help our present generation. These observations, which I'm kind of observing, and also in conversation with some of my Hong Kong artist friends who are also collecting and also observing these things. It's too soon to kind of like, I think, react in a kind of artistic way without it being too literal. But it's definitely an arena for performativity to kind of be used in this respect. So thank you for those questions, very good questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Melati and Ming, for the conversation and for your generosity with your time as well. I'm aware that we are running out of time. Actually, we're just a little bit late, but it was amazing to hear you. Before we wrap up, would you like to say any last words? Or should we end it here?
I think I would like to thank everybody who has been joining us for like more than one hour now, very intensive, almost 1.5 hours. I wish you all stay healthy and keep the quality time wherever you are, whatever you do, and please take care. And performance art is not going anywhere after the pandemic. Art is still there and we will come back. Art is always there. So I'm not worried about this, that we are, like becoming less artsy, less in art, but please, more important is our well-being, and please take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melati. Ming?
I just want to say that I think it's great and important that we have talks like this. It's a good job that AAA is organizing these talks where we can connect with practitioners from different perspectives around the world and try and find solutions, parallels from our own context. So thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to more of these talks.
We are able to continue thanks to artists like yourselves. So we have to give you the biggest thanks to you. But just to wrap up, I also want to thank everyone who joined us and who stayed with us for a long time today. And thanks for your questions as well. I just want to say that it's an ongoing series that we are organizing, the Life Lessons. And next month, we'll have the third session of Life Lessons with two pioneer artist educators, Suzanne Lacey and Wu Mali. And we'll speak about social practice and feminist pedagogy. I think we'll keep speaking about the ideas of care and communities next month as well. So please stay tuned. And I also want to thank the AAA team who's behind the scenes. So thank you so much, Susanna, Sam, Paco, and Debbie. And I really hope to see you all in July. Thank you so much.
Thank you.